I never considered myself a particularly observant person before all this started. My life followed the same comfortable pattern every day: alarm at 6 a.m., 2 cups of black coffee while scrolling through news headlines, out the door by 7:15 for my 40-minute commute to the accounting firm, where I'd worked for 8 years. Sarah and I had settled into our quiet suburban life easily enough, splitting chores and weekends spent binge watching whatever series everyone was talking about. It was ordinary, safe, the kind of life where you stop noticing details after a while because nothing ever changes. The first time I saw the car, it barely registered. Just an old tan sedan parked across the street on a Tuesday morning, the kind of beater you'd see at a junkyard. What caught my attention was how early it was there at 5:45 a.m., according to my microwave clock, when I spotted it through the kitchen window while waiting for my coffee to brew. The streetlights were still on, casting long shadows that made it hard to see inside. I remember thinking maybe someone had car trouble, but there was no hood up, no emergency lights, just the car, engine off. Someone sitting motionless behind the wheel. By Thursday, I realized this wasn't a coincidence. Same car, same spot, same unnatural stillness from the driver. I started timing my coffee breaks to watch from the window. The man I assumed it was a man from the silhouette never moved. No checking his phone, no adjusting mirrors, not even the slight rocking motion of someone breathing, just waiting. Sarah teased me when I mentioned it over dinner. "Maybe he's stalking you," she joked, spearing a piece of broccoli. We both laughed, but something about the way she quickly changed the subject made me wonder if she'd noticed it too. The following Monday, I decided to walk past it on my way to get the mail. My pulse hammered in my throat as I crossed the street, pretending to check my phone while stealing glances through the grimy windshield. The man looked older than I expected, late 50s maybe, with thinning gray hair and deep lines around his mouth. He wore a faded brown jacket that might have been nice 20 years ago. What unsettled me most was his hands. They gripped the wheel at exactly 10 and 2, fingers splayed unnaturally wide, like he was holding on to something much larger than a steering wheel. I coughed loudly, dropping my keys for an excuse to linger. Nothing, not even a twitch. Then, as I straightened up, his head turned toward me with mechanical slowness. Not the natural movement of someone noticing you, but the deliberate rotation of something that had been aware of me the whole time. His eyes were the flat, glossy black of a shark's. No whites, no pupils, just dark voids that seemed to drink in the morning light. My bladder nearly let go when his lips parted slightly, revealing teeth that looked wrong. Too many, too sharp. The car started without him touching the key, engine growling to life as he drove away without ever breaking eye contact. The police station smelled like burnt coffee and industrial cleaner when I filed the report later that day. Officer John humored me at first, but I saw the moment his professional mask slipped when his computer screen showed the license plate belonged to a 1987 Buick Skylark that had been compacted into a metal cube at a junkyard in 2014. "Sometimes these systems glitch," he said too quickly, but his pen trembled slightly as he wrote. "They promised extra patrols, but the car never appeared when they looked. Only for me. Only ever for me." Sarah stopped laughing about it when she found me at 3 a.m. one night, crouched by our bedroom window, with the curtains parted just enough to see the street below. The car was there again, parked directly beneath a broken streetlight that had worked perfectly that afternoon. The man stood beside it this time, facing our house, his arms hanging limp at his sides. Moonlight glinted off those terrible teeth as his head tilted up toward our window. I didn't need to pull Sarah away from the glass. She backpedaled so fast she tripped over the laundry basket. We spent the rest of the night in the living room with every light on, pretending to watch infomercials while jumping at every creak of the house. Things started disappearing after that. Little things at first, a spare key from the hook by the door, my favorite coffee mug, the framed photo of us from last year's company picnic, then bigger things. I'd wake up to find the front door slightly ajar despite deadbolting it. Our security camera footage would glitch during the exact minutes when something moved past our bedroom window. Sarah's perfume began smelling wrong, like wet earth. We stopped talking about it, as if giving voice to our fear would make it more real. The breaking point came when our neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, asked why we had visitors so late at night. "That old car's been idling outside your place past midnight all week," she said, squinting at me over her rose bushes. "Your uncle or something?" My blood turned to ice. Sarah wasn't home when I rushed inside to check the security app. The timestamps showed nothing unusual. But between 12:17 a.m. and 12:23 a.m., 6 minutes exactly, every camera displayed the same error message: signal lost. The temperature had dropped 15 degrees during that gap, according to our smart thermostat. We packed in a frenzy that weekend, throwing clothes into suitcases while jumping at every car that passed. Our landlord didn't even charge a penalty. When we broke the lease, he took one look at our haggard faces and just nodded, like he'd been expecting this. The last thing I saw as we pulled away was the sedan parked 3 houses down, the driver's side window rolling down, just enough to reveal those gleaming teeth in the shadows. The new apartment building has 24-hour security and cameras in every hallway. Sarah sleeps with the bathroom light on now, though neither of us mentioned why. For a while, I thought we'd escaped. Then last Tuesday, as I waited for the elevator after work, the security camera above me flickered, and from the far end of the parking garage, I heard an engine turn over with that same distinctive rattle. I didn't look, didn't run, just stepped into the elevator and pressed the button hard enough to hurt my finger. Some nights now, when I can't sleep, I'll catch Sarah staring out our 12th floor window at the streets below. She thinks I don't notice how her hands shake when she pulls the curtains shut extra tight. We both know he's out there somewhere, and we both know, without ever saying it, that he's not done with us yet. The clock on my dashboard showed 8:30 p.m. when I first noticed something wrong with my truck. I was hauling a full load of groceries from Bakersfield to Portland, making good time until the engine started making a strange knocking sound. The check engine light flickered on just as the first raindrops hit my windshield. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, feeling the trailer sway slightly behind me as I reduced speed. The smell of hot oil began mixing with the damp air coming through my vents. Up ahead, my GPS showed a gas station about 7 miles away. If I could just make it there without breaking down completely. The rain intensified quickly, transforming from a light drizzle to a heavy downpour that made the road nearly invisible. For 20 tense minutes, I nursed the truck along, listening to the engine's worsening condition. Each time I pressed the accelerator, the knocking grew louder, vibrating through the floorboards. The scent of burning oil became stronger, making my eyes water slightly as I rolled down the window for fresh air. My GPS kept recalculating, showing the gas station was now only 3 miles ahead if I could maintain this speed. The wipers worked furiously, but couldn't keep up with the sheets of rain now pounding my windshield. I leaned forward in my seat, squinting through the water-streaked glass, my shoulders tense with concentration. Just when I thought I might have to pull over, the glowing Shell station sign appeared like a beacon through the storm. The gas station was nearly deserted when I pulled in. Just one old man watching a small TV behind the bulletproof glass of the convenience store. I parked near the garage bay, where a heavy-set mechanic in oil-stained coveralls was smoking under the awning. "Sounds like fuel injector problems," he said after listening to my engine for 30 seconds. "Gonna need about 3 hours to fix her up proper." He introduced himself as Carl and handed me a stained work order to sign. The rain drummed loudly on the metal roof of the garage as I watched him begin disassembling parts of my engine, the fluorescent lights casting long shadows across the concrete floor. To pass the time, I sat in the small attached diner, nursing a cup of bitter coffee and picking at a greasy burger. The vinyl booth creaked under my weight as I alternated between watching the storm through rain-streaked windows and checking my phone for weather updates. Lightning flashed periodically, illuminating the empty highway stretching into darkness beyond the gas station lights. The waitress, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, refilled my coffee without asking every 20 minutes. At one point, a state trooper came in shaking water off his hat, giving me a brief nod before taking a seat at the counter. The clock above the grill ticked slowly toward midnight as I waited for Carl to finish the repairs. It was nearly midnight when Carl finally wiped his hands on a rag and told me the truck was ready. "Replaced 2 injectors and cleaned out the fuel lines," he said, handing me a receipt that made me wince. "She'll get you to Portland, but you'll want a full service soon." I thanked him and stepped back out into the storm, which had somehow grown worse during the repairs. The wind howled through the gas pumps as I hurried to my truck, rain soaking through my jacket in seconds. When I started the engine, it ran smoother than before, but there was a strange new smell in the cab, like wet wool. I couldn't identify. As I pulled back onto the highway, the storm seemed to intensify, the wipers barely keeping up with the torrential downpour. My headlights reflected off the wet pavement, creating strange illusions in the darkness. That's when I first saw her, a lone figure standing beneath the last working streetlight before the highway stretched into empty darkness. A woman in a soaked gray sweater, her arm outstretched in that universal hitchhiker's gesture. My foot hovered over the accelerator as every instinct told me to keep driving past this stranger in the storm. But when my headlights illuminated her face, I saw such raw terror in her expression that I found myself hitting the brakes. She was in my passenger seat before I could reconsider, bringing with her the scent of rain and something else, coppery and sharp like old pennies. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse as if she'd been screaming. Water dripped from her matted brown hair onto my dashboard as she kept glancing nervously at the side mirror. "He's coming," she said suddenly, her fingers digging into her wet jeans. I checked my rearview mirror, but saw only sheets of rain and darkness behind us. "Who's coming?" I asked, but she just shook her head violently, rainwater flying from her hair. I noticed her left sleeve was torn at the wrist, revealing pale skin beneath. No tattoo, though I wouldn't understand the significance of that until later. We drove in tense silence for about 15 minutes, the only sounds the pounding rain and the truck's heater struggling against the damp chill. Every few minutes, she'd stiffen and check the mirror again, her breathing becoming rapid. I tried making conversation, asking her name, where she was headed, but she remained silent except for occasional whispered pleas to go faster. Then, in the flash of passing headlights, I saw her face go deathly pale. "He's here," she screamed, and before I could react, she yanked the door handle and threw herself out of the moving truck. The trailer fishtailed dangerously as I slammed the brakes, fighting to keep control on the wet pavement. When I finally got the truck stopped, I leaped out into the storm, my flashlight beam cutting through the rain as I searched the roadside. There was no sign of her, no body on the pavement, no footprints in the muddy shoulder. Nothing, just the relentless rain and the sound of my own panicked breathing. Back in the cab, the passenger seat was soaked through, and on the door handle was a reddish-brown smear that definitely wasn't rust. My hands shook as I put the truck back in gear and continued down the highway, checking my mirrors constantly. At the next 24-hour truck stop, I must have looked as shaken as I felt, because the night manager immediately pushed a cup of coffee toward me. When I described the hitchhiker, his friendly expression vanished. He reached under the counter and produced a wrinkled missing person flyer with a woman's photo. "Leah Carter," he said quietly, "disappeared 3 weeks ago near that Shell station you came from." My stomach dropped when I read the description mentioning her distinctive crescent moon tattoo on left wrist. The woman in my truck hadn't had any tattoo. The manager called the local police while I sat staring at the photo, my coffee growing cold. The detective who arrived an hour later had the weary look of someone who'd seen too much. He spread crime scene photos across the diner table. A shallow grave, a woman's body in a gray sweater. "Leah Carter," he confirmed, watching my reaction closely. "Been dead at least a month." Then he slid another photo toward me, a mugshot of a different woman with stringy blonde hair and cold eyes. "Sarah Miller. We think she's been using victims' clothes to target drivers." He explained how Sarah would study missing persons reports, then impersonate the victims to hitch rides. "You're lucky," he said. "Most drivers who pick her up disappear within 2 days." For weeks after that night, I checked my truck obsessively before every trip. Once I found muddy footprints leading to the passenger side when I knew I'd been alone. Another time, the distinct smell of wet wool lingered in the cab for hours after I'd cleaned it. The paranoia reached its peak when I came home to find my apartment door unlocked. The deadbolt I always engaged was disengaged. Inside, everything appeared normal until I noticed my closet door slightly ajar. My pulse pounded in my ears as I approached with a baseball bat, throwing the door open to find my clothes undisturbed, except for a gray sweater on the floor that wasn't mine, its left sleeve torn exactly where I remembered. The police forensic team found no fingerprints, no DNA evidence in my apartment. "Maybe you brought it home without realizing," the detective suggested, though his eyes kept darting to my windows. That night, I slept with all the lights on, startling awake at every sound. Around 3 a.m., I heard the unmistakable click of someone testing my front door handle. The peephole showed an empty hallway, but when I opened the door, the carpet outside was damp, as if someone had stood there, dripping wet for a long time. 2 days later, the detective called with what he called good news. Sarah's abandoned car had been found near the Canadian border, its trunk containing clothing from multiple victims. "She's gone to ground," he said. "Case closed." But that same night, an envelope appeared under my door, containing a Polaroid of my truck parked at that Shell station, taken from the tree line. On the back, in what looked like lipstick, "Next time, you'll keep driving." Now I take different routes every trip and triple check my locks each night. But sometimes, when I'm driving through heavy rain, I catch a whiff of wet wool in the cab. The detective insists Sarah is probably dead in a ditch somewhere. But I know better, because last week at a rest stop near the Oregon border, I saw a familiar figure standing beneath a flickering streetlight, a woman in a gray sweater, her arm outstretched. And when our eyes met through the rain-streaked windshield, I saw something new in her expression this time: recognition. I pressed the accelerator so hard the tires squealed. Because the worst part isn't the notes or the footprints. It's knowing that somewhere out there on a dark, rainy highway, another driver is about to see a woman standing under a streetlight. And next time, she might not let them drive away. The alarm on my phone chirped at 6:30 a.m., like it always did. I rolled over in bed, silencing it with a practiced swipe before the second tone could sound. Morning light filtered through the half-closed blinds, painting stripes across the unmade bed. Another Tuesday, another work-from-home day in my quiet two-bedroom on Elmwood Drive. I padded to the kitchen in bare feet, the hardwood cool against my skin. The coffee maker gurgled to life as I scooped grounds into the filter. 2 heaping tablespoons, just enough to get through my morning emails without feeling jittery. Outside the kitchen window, Mrs. Peterson was already tending her roses across the street, her wide-brimmed hat bobbing among the blooms. Normal, ordinary, exactly how I liked it. The first package arrived that afternoon. I was elbows deep in a logo redesign for a local bakery when my doorbell chimed. The notification on my phone showed a generic brown box sitting squarely in the center of my welcome mat. Odd, I hadn't ordered anything. By the time I reached the door, maybe 30 seconds later, the delivery person was already gone. No truck in sight, just the package, unmarked except for my name and address, handwritten in unnervingly perfect block letters. The cardboard was slightly damp, as if it had been sitting somewhere humid before being placed on my dry porch. I brought it inside, turning it over in my hands. No shipping label, no tracking number, just that meticulous handwriting and a faint chemical smell I couldn't quite place. Something like wet newspaper. The tape sealing the box was standard packing tape, the kind you could buy anywhere. My thumb hesitated under the flap. This wasn't right. I hadn't ordered anything. Nobody sent me packages except my sister at my birthday in March, and it was only October. But curiosity won out. The tape peeled away with a sticky ripping sound. Inside, nestled in a bed of crumpled packing paper, was a single VHS tape. No note, no explanation, just the tape. Its label bearing 3 words in that same precise handwriting. For your eyes. I set it on the coffee table and stepped back, as if it might explode. The tape sat there all afternoon while I worked, its presence like a splinter in my mind. By 5 p.m., I couldn't stand it anymore. I drove to the thrift store across town and bought the cheapest VCR they had. The machine whirred to life when I plugged it in at home, its display glowing an eerie green in my dim living room. The tape slid in with a heavy click. Static hissed across the TV screen for several seconds before resolving into a grainy image. My living room. Not a similar room. Not a set made to look like my space. My actual living room with the same IKEA couch, the same coffee table stain from where I'd spilled coffee last month, the same crooked picture frame on the far wall that I kept meaning to straighten. The camera angle was impossible, positioned high in the corner where the wall met the ceiling, looking down at an angle no security camera could achieve. A timestamp in the bottom corner read October 15, 2023. Time 3:20 am, last night's date, in the dead of night. My breath caught as the footage continued. For nearly 5 minutes, nothing moved except the occasional flicker of streetlights through the blinds. Then, with no warning, the front door swung open. No key turning, no lock clicking, just opening. A figure entered, tall, wearing a dark hoodie that swallowed any distinguishing features. Hands tucked in pockets. They moved with casual familiarity, pausing to examine my bookshelf, running a finger along the TV stand, even picking up and replacing the remote control exactly where it had been. When they turned toward the camera, toward where a camera shouldn't have been, the hood shifted just enough to reveal 3 thin vertical scars on their wrist, pale against their skin, deliberate. Then they froze, cocked their head as if listening, and left as silently as they'd come. The footage ended there. I must have rewound and rewatched it a dozen times, searching for some detail that would prove it was fake. But the longer I looked, the more certain I became. That was my living room. Those were my things. And someone had been inside without me knowing. The police officer who took my report the next morning had the tired patience of someone humoring a paranoid civilian. "Probably just a prank," he said, not even looking up from his notepad. Kids these days with their editing software. But when I showed him the tape, his pen stopped moving. He rewound it himself twice before handing it back. "I'll file a report," but without evidence of a break-in. The packages kept coming. A week later, a padded envelope appeared in my mailbox with no postage. Inside was a Ziploc bag containing a lock of dark hair that matched mine exactly when I held them side by side. 10 days after that, a small box arrived containing a Polaroid photo of me sleeping in my bed, taken from the doorway. The date scrawled on the back matched the night before. Each delivery came with that same chemical smell. Each appeared when I wasn't looking. And each time, if I glanced out the window afterward, I'd catch a glimpse of an old brown UPS truck turning the corner at the end of the street. I installed security cameras, changed my locks, started sleeping with a baseball bat beside the bed. Then came the night I heard him. 3:30 a.m. The number burned into my brain by now. A sound jerked me awake. Not the door, not footsteps, but the subtle squeak of hardwood near my bookshelf downstairs. The sound a floorboard makes when weight shifts across it after years of settling. I grabbed the bat and crept downstairs, my pulse loud in my ears. The living room was dark, except for the faint glow of streetlights through the blinds. Everything looked normal. The couch, the coffee table, the TV. Then I smelled it. That same chemical odor from the packages, stronger now, sharper. Something moved near the front door. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light. A person, tall, hooded, standing perfectly still just inside my doorway. We stared at each other across the dark room. 2 breaths. 3. Then he moved, not toward me, not aggressively, just turned with eerie calm and reached for the doorknob. I lunged, bat raised. "Stop." The door swung open before I got halfway across the room. By the time I reached the porch, he was already climbing into that same old UPS truck idling at the curb. The gray-haired driver didn't even look at me as they sped away. I chased them in my car, my hands slick on the wheel. The truck wove through side streets with unnatural precision, always staying just ahead. At a stoplight, I managed to snap photos of the rear license plate. But when I checked them later, the numbers were blurred beyond recognition. Then they turned onto Mulberry Lane, a dead-end street with no turnoffs, and vanished. The police found the truck abandoned in an industrial park the next morning. No fingerprints, no registration, just that chemical smell lingering in the air, and a single new VHS tape on the passenger seat labeled, "Last Warning." That was 6 months ago. The packages stopped. The truck hasn't returned. I moved to a new place across town. I still check the locks 3 times before bed. Still wake at 3 a.m. sometimes. Convinced I smell chemicals in the air. Still have those blurry photos of the license plate that shouldn't exist. And sometimes, when I'm working late at my computer, I'll catch movement in the reflection of my monitor. Just a flicker of darkness near the doorway. I never turn to look. Because the truth is, I don't want to know if he's really there. And that fear, more than anything else, is what keeps me up at night.